This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hey everyone, this is Peter, and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. As you can probably hear, I am still getting over this cold. It's better, but it's not quite there yet, so bear with me. After we talk about this day in history, we will move on to our story of the day, the story of Philo Farnsworth, the young man who invented television and changed history. Most great inventions come from crowded laboratories, university halls, or even corporate research divisions. But not this one. Today's story begins with a boy on a farm in rural Idaho. A boy who dreamed not of tractors or harvests, but of light, electricity, and the power to send images through the air. He was just 14 years old when he had the idea that would change how humanity sees the world. Literally. We will finish up with a history brief, where we turn to the conversation series Vault and a discussion with a Medal of Honor recipient, Jack H. Jacobs. A quick word from our sponsors. This day in history. NORAD stands for North American Aerospace Defense Command, and it is a joint U.S.-Canadian military organization responsible for watching the skies over North America 24/7. But then came December 24th, 1955. A Sears department store in Colorado Springs, the same city where NORAD's predecessor was based, ran a Christmas newspaper ad that said, "Hey kiddies, call Santa, dial ME26681, and talk to Santa Claus himself." The phone number was misprinted. Instead of the Sears Santa hotline, the ad accidentally printed the top-secret emergency phone number of the Continental Air Defense Command, or CONAD, the organization that later became NORAD. On Christmas Eve, 1955, the red phone on the desk of Colonel Harry Shoup, the duty officer that night, started ringing off the hook. The first call was a little kid asking, "Are you really Santa Claus?" Colonel Shoup could have hung up or told the child it was a wrong number, but instead he played along. "Ho, ho, ho," he said. "Have you been a good boy or girl?" When more kids kept calling, he told his staff to answer every call and give Santa's current location to anyone who phoned. That night, CONAD's staff started making up Santa's progress on the giant glass tracking board that they normally used to plot unidentified aircraft. Santa just left the North Pole, now crossing Greenland, heading toward Iceland. Local radio stations heard about it and started calling up for live updates. CONAD gave them the real-time Santa sightings all night long. The next year, 1956, they did it on purpose. When NORAD officially replaced CONAD in 1958, it inherited and continued the tradition, which is still around to this very day. Story of the day. Philo Taylor Farnsworth was born on August 19, 1906, in a log cabin near Beaver, Utah. His family was poor but ambitious, pioneers of the early 20th century, chasing opportunity across the American West. When Philo was 12, the Farnsworths moved to a farm in Rigby, Idaho, a place so remote that most homes didn't yet have electricity. But Philo was fascinated by the whole thing. He devoured science magazines, tinkered with generators, and fixed broken radios. He could take apart a motor, wire a fuse box, or explain magnetic fields better than most adults. And one spring morning, while plowing the family field, he had a revelation. As he guided the horse-drawn plow across neat parallel lines of soil, an idea struck him. What if you could divide an image into lines, scan it one strip at a time, and then reassemble it somewhere else, all electronically? That, he realized, could be the basis for transmitting moving pictures through the air. In that moment, the seed of television was planted, not in a lab, but in a teenage boy's imagination on an Idaho farm in his teenage boy's room. Philo's family couldn't afford college, but his intellect set him apart. At Rigby High School, he amazed teachers with his technical sketches and ideas. He even convinced one science teacher, Justin Tallman, to let him use classroom resources to work on electrical experiments. Tallman encouraged him, storing his diagrams, including one remarkable sketch showing an electronic image dissector, a camera tube that could convert visual information into electrical signals. In 1922, the Farnsworths moved again, this time to Provo, Utah, where Philo enrolled briefly at Brigham Young University, but his father's death forced him to drop out and support the family instead. Still, he never gave up on his idea. He was convinced that the key to true television wasn't mechanical, as most inventors then believed, but it was electronic, faster, cleaner, and much more efficient. If he could capture an image with a beam of electrons, scan it line by line, and then reproduce it on a screen coated with phosphor, he could create pictures out of electricity itself. No gears, no spinning discs, just pure science. By the 1920s, inventors around the world were chasing the dream of seeing by radio. Mechanical systems using spinning discs and light-sensitive cells could transmit crude, flickering silhouettes, but the images were small, dim, and unstable. Farnsworth, barely 20 at the time, believed that he could do better. In 1926, he moved to San Francisco, where he met two investors who believed in his vision, George Everson and Leslie Gorel. They agreed to fund his experiments and set him up in a small laboratory at 202 Green Street, just a few blocks from Telegraph Hill. Working with his talented assistant, Clifford Gardner, Farnsworth built his first prototypes. They scavenged vacuum tubes, coils, and glass plates, often soldering late into the night, working from Philo's hand-drawn diagrams, some dating back to when he was just a teenager. Then on September 7, 1927, in that modest lab, history was made. Farnsworth aimed his camera tube, his image dissector as he called it, at a simple glass slide with a single straight line drawn on it. On the receiver in the next room, the line reappeared, perfectly reproduced by electrical signals. For the first time, a human-made image had been transmitted electronically. Philo Farnsworth, age 21, had invented television. Soon after, Farnsworth filed for patents on his invention, protecting not just the image dissector, but the system that made television possible. The scanning, transmission, and reconstruction of images using electrons. Meanwhile, corporate giants were watching. At RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, its head David Sarnoff had built an empire on radio and now wanted to conquer the next medium as well. Sarnoff's chief scientist, Vladimir Zworykin, had been experimenting with his own camera tube, the iconoscope, but it wasn't yet working properly. When RCA heard of Farnsworth's success, they sent representatives to see his system in action. In 1930, Zworykin himself visited Farnsworth's lab. After the demonstration, Zworykin reportedly told Farnsworth, "It's a beautiful instrument, but of course, the idea is old, it belongs to us." RCA would later claim television as its own invention, sparking a legal war that would last for years. But Farnsworth had the one thing that mattered most: proof and patents. What followed was one of the most consequential intellectual property battles in American history. RCA, the corporate giant with billions in resources, refused to pay licensing fees to a 20-something-year-old inventor from Idaho. They claimed that Farnsworth's designs were derivative or based on prior work by others. Farnsworth fought back, representing himself as both scientist and advocate. In 1934, the U.S. Patent Office ruled in his favor, recognizing him as the first inventor of the fully electric television system. In fact, and this is the crazy part of it all, his high school sketch, preserved by his teacher, Justin Tolman, became the smoking gun. It was drawn years before RCA ever filed any of its patents. It was an extraordinary triumph. The farm boy versus the industrial titan, and the boy had won. But victory came at a price. Even as Farnsworth continued to refine his invention, others began to commercialize it. By the late 1930s, RCA under Sarnoff had perfected mass production technology and began promoting television to the public. In 1939, at the New York World's Fair, Sarnoff introduced the first public television broadcast, declaring it a window to the world. Farnsworth, whose designs had made it all possible, received no invitation. He continued his own research, developing better cathode ray tubes, radar systems, and even early nuclear fusion concepts. But television had become too big, too corporate, too expensive for just one man to control. By the time the technology became widespread in the 1950s, the world had all but forgotten who really invented it. Farnsworth's name rarely appeared in the credits. Despite his genius, Farnsworth's later life was marked by frustration and obscurity. He suffered bouts of depression and alcoholism, haunted by the feeling that his life's work had been stolen by corporate America. In one interview years later, he said, "There's nothing sadder than watching your own invention come to life without you." In 1957, on the 30th anniversary of his breakthrough, he appeared on the CBS game show, I've Got a Secret. When the host asked him what his secret was, he smiled modestly and said, "I invented television." The audience gasped, then gave him a standing ovation. He died in 1971 at the age of 64, his legacy still overshadowed, but his invention lighting the world. The History Brief. Today, we reach back into the Conversation Series vault to hear from the Medal of Honor recipient, Colonel Jack H. Jacobs. You can find the entire episode wherever you're listening to this podcast. How has your perspective on heroism evolved since receiving the Medal of Honor?
It has, actually. You know, if you ask any Medal of Honor recipient, they'll tell you the same thing, that he didn't think that he was particularly heroic, that there were people who were at least as valorous on the same day. There's a Medal of Honor recipient named Brian Thacker who very ruefully remembers from Vietnam during his action. He said there are 3 grieving mothers still whose sons were every bit as brave. And that's why we all realize that we wear the medal not for ourselves, but for all those who can't, all those who served valiantly and never got home because they were killed in action. You don't think what you're doing is heroic because everybody is doing something to defeat the enemy and take care of each other. And until people are ardently trying to kill you, and you have to depend on your buddies, it's not until that happens do you realize what true heroism really is. It's the other guy who's heroic, not you.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and making this humble show a success. If you have any questions, you can reach me at peter@historyshortspodcast.com, or you could visit www.historyshortspodcast.com or look for us on X, Patreon, and Facebook.